Welcome to BIA, Canada's top black media provider. Whether you're looking for shows on fashion, art, music, or simple lifestyle, we bring you the best content the black community in Canada has to offer and so much more. And better yet, do you have an idea for a project you'd like us to help you with? We provide equipment, studio, and office space, as well as a team of dedicated individuals to help you bring those ideas to life. So don't wait. Check out our new website at biamedia.ca for more information on how to contact us and start creating today. BIA Media, your way.
What is up, everybody? It's Dr. Vibe here, host and producer of the award-winning Dr. Vibe Show, the home of Epic Conversations. And I'm the host of Epic Conversations, 2020 Best Podcast News Award winner, 2018 Innovation Award winner given out by the Canadian Ethnic Media Association. And I host the only online conversation in the world for fathers and dads that is sponsored by Dove Men Care. It's also co-sponsored by Dad Central, Canada's national fatherhood organization. And as always, like to say you're blessed, highly favored, a magnet for miracles, and a solution for someone's problem. Hey, it's Sunday afternoon, in and around, a little bit past 5 o'clock. Got started a little late. That's not our fault. Our producer didn't remember the time switch. That's another conversation. But we're here as always. Black Canada Talking is a live online event that provides Black Canadians the opportunity to give their takes and POVs on stories that are of importance to them. And we are blessed to do another roundtable. And we're blessed to have two of our three regular participants here today. She's back and she loves to run in this cold weather. Elle Jones, how are you?
I'm good. Tired, still recovering from Black History Month, but
how was Black History Month for you?
A lot of talks. So you're constantly up, nervous to speaking down. So it was a lot of energy. You can see I've rearranged my apartment. So
I love the bookcase in the background. Yeah. That looks very sharp. It looks so tenured.
I have a different setup now, so that's news. But, yeah.
I will bring Cesar on and just and ask, because you weren't with us in our last conversation and we had about, how we felt about Black History Month, but I'd love to sort of revisit that conversation because you didn't have the opportunity to be part of it. So let's bring Cesar on. My brother, how you doing?
I'm good, brother Dr. Vibe, Sister L, and BIA Media. Thank you always for having us. I'm very good. I'd like to say, I don't want to forget, in Toronto, there is a great organization of women, Haguruka, Haguruka. It's a great women's organization. I had the honor to give them a conference yesterday. They do great work for the community. Show them support. Look them up online, Haguruk. I gave them a conference on racism in the education sector and in child welfare. And that was beautiful. People were engaged. Let us support our people. Haguruka is who I'm supporting today.
Wonderful. Wonderful. So, Elle, since we've got Cesar also with us, I want to get your thoughts now. It's post-Black History Month. It's one of those months that people, like the people on the screen, we work like crazy. But then there's after. And we were talking a little bit before we went live because what are we going to chat about today? But I also want to get from both of you the state of D&I, diversity and inclusion, because I'm getting a lot of mixed messages from people in regards to the state of D&I. Of course, George Floyd happened and DNI was a very big thing. How are you feeling? I just combining a Black History Month and also the whole area of DNI as we chat today on March 13th, 2022. So Elle, I'll let you lead off.
So the state of, or what we also call EDI.
EDI, sorry.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's fine, whatever you call it. I mean, there's a few things on that. I saw this thing from York. So, York is like, they're having a labor action. As part of that, they were talking about that York wasn't giving like course release for people engaged in diversity work. And now I actually have a problem with that not because I disagree that people should have course release, but I actually think that this is a case where people are sectioning off something and missing a broader labor issue, right? So they're like, oh, well, Black and Indigenous people do so much mentorship and we do so much service work and we should get a course release. I'm like, everybody should be getting course release the amount of service that we do. I mean, my university is so small that we all have huge amounts of service just by nature of like, you have to, right? So that's everybody. And I feel like that's a situation where it is an EDI issue, but it's also more broadly about workplace justice, right? Like lots of Black people are precarious, for example. And what the solution to that is, yes, make sure that like Black women aren't precarious workers, but also all precarious workers in the university, for example, should be having a path to tenure. That's for everybody. It can't just be for one group of people. So I think there's ways in which this gets used to distract us from like the broader issue, which is rooted in capitalism. And then we make it into an EDI issue. And it is because it also impacts us. So everything that impacts us by nature has a racial lens. But we actually would be doing better to fight that on a broader level. Like my interest in the university isn't like as long as I'm doing okay. So if I can get course releases and I can get a tenure job and I'm Black, then that's great. If there's injustice in the workplace, we all should be engaged in having a more robust union, in having better labor conditions for us all. And as we know, Black people have always been on the front lines of leading these kind of things. Like we've always, fought for everybody's rights and we deserve to have our rights too. But I think that, I often am seeing it used to like ignore what is the actual broader issue in order to focus in, well, like, let's just have an initiative for Black people. I'm like, we need initiatives for Black people. But we also, as Black people, need to recognize that our liberation is tied to broader issues. And we can't accept like broader workplace injustices as long as we get some kind of EDI release out of it. Like that's not actually how you address injustice in the university. That leads to the constant conditions in which Black people will always be facing adverse conditions in the university because of how the university is constructed. And the solution to that isn't EDI initiatives. It's actually going to the root of the university as an institution and, how much students are paying in fees. Obviously, like, how much of the workforce is now precarious labor, how few tenure jobs there are, like the lack of payment for precarious labor, the lack of contract options. So people have worked for years in the same institution and have no path, not even into tenure, not even into like a permanent repeated contract. Like these are things that would benefit Black people if we fought for them collectively. So I think that that's one issue. Like when we phrase something as EDI and remove ourselves from the broader solidarities, particularly when it comes to labor issues. I don't know if this person was Black or not. I suspect from their name they may be Indian, but I don't know if you saw the case from University of Saskatchewan where a janitor was fired for stealing $5 worth of rags from the university.
What?
Yeah. And I'm not sure. The name is Julamon, so I don't know what that is. I don't think it's a white name, but I think it might be Indian as well. I'm not sure. It seems to me to be a person of color. But like this is the kind of stuff that's going on in a university. A janitor was accused of stealing $5 worth of rags. The university fired him. He went to an employment tribunal and they said firing him was wrong, but 6 months suspended without pay was fine. And then the university appealed that for rags, literal garbage. So, as somebody working in a university,
gosh.
Like, is my main concern going to be like, I want course release? Like, is that the first injustice in the university? Or is it that like our janitorial staff, which by the way is overwhelmingly Black and like people of color and immigrants and, like if you look in a university, like the professorship is mostly white, the building staff is Black, like the people that are serving you at Tim Hortons are probably Black, like, the people doing the worst paid, not even minimum wage labor in the university are largely going to be Black. And like, we have to remember to fight for them. So, like we actually have to fight the inequality in an institution and not just settle on EDI. And I've gone on that point long enough. Yes, the second part is there backlash? Like, absolutely. This has been the backlash to like CRT, like critical race theory, which is also hilarious because, people basically were able to effectively object to CRT because it has race in the title, right? So nobody's read it. It's theory that comes out of law. Like people are familiar with intersectionality, like Kimberly Crenshaw. It begins in law schools, and the root of CRT is more or less arguing that like band-aid solutions and like a bit more diversity doesn't actually address like the fundamentally in unjust roots of our system. So starting in the law system, they were like, no, just having like more Black judges or more Black defense lawyers or prosecutors doesn't get to the root of what the law actually is, and that so much of our society is structured around the social, legal, and economic legacies of slavery that still exist, and we have to get to that root. That's what CRT is about, right? So it's nothing to do with like, you're not learning it in grade 7. Like it's not being taught. We know all this. So this is just bunk. But of course, in order to avoid talking about race, we started calling things EDI, right? So to exactly avoid what happened with calling stuff critical race theory and getting people being like, oh, it says race, it must be racist, it must hate white people. Well, like, let's not talk about race, even though what we're trying to talk about is anti-racism. Let's make it sound nice and call it equity, diversity, and diversion. That was a Freudian slip. Equity, diversity, and inclusion. And then that sounds nice. You want to include people. But of course, what do you get? White people being like, well, isn't diversity, like if I'm from a rural region, like I'm Ukrainian and that's a diverse, thing. I'm Hungarian, like that's diverse, right? So automatically you get people being like, well, how come inclusion doesn't include all the different flavors of white people? I'm like, well, that's what we get for not like calling the thing what it actually is supposed to be, which is anti-racist and specifically anti-Black. But we don't want to use those words. So we use these like inclusion words, and we shouldn't be surprised when people like water it down. So there's definitely a lot of backlash happening around these initiatives, and my critiques aren't on those critiques like the, oh no, there's too many Black people, oh no, we're being forced not to make racist jokes, like, oh no, somebody came and trained me. But I do have a problem with how EDI very much, I think, does become an elitist philosophy if we're not careful. That's about like those of us who are in universities, those of us who are in government jobs, those of us who might be on boards, those of us who are already doing well in professional spheres, and then are also asking for, and it's not that you don't experience racism in like a professional institution, but what does EDI mean to a mother living in a shelter? Like, what does EDI mean to somebody facing deportation? Like, what does EDI mean in a prison? What does EDI mean to somebody who can't pay their bills? Like, and this is where I'm like, we need liberation and justice. I just do not ever believe in the idea of like sprinkling a few Black faces lets institutions off the hook, and then we just fight for a bigger salary for ourselves and nothing for everybody else. That was too long. I'm sorry.
No, not at all. Not at all. It's right on point. And we appreciate you giving it all. So much appreciated. And I know Cesar appreciate because I saw him nodding his head, putting his thumbs up. Cesar, you're very much involved in EDI, D&I, and would love to get your lens also on where it stands right now.
Excellent topic. Excellent question. From the start, I have to state I am a director of EDI for Eastern Ontario in child welfare, as I've said before. I'm also a consultant on EDI to many institutions. I'm going to take the last thing Sister Elle said in terms of being careful of the elitism that comes with EDI in terms of those who are already doing well, those who are in university circles, educated and all that, but that truly addressing EDI is about that Black person in the incarceration/justice system. That single mother who has to balance socioeconomics with identity. That person who suffers from disability and is Black at the intersectionalities. That immigrant was LGBTQ. That person was English or French is not so good, and that is if they even speak English or French. This is really what EDI is. And I'm going to maybe surprise some people. There's going to need more of it. There's going to need more of it, notably because I think Canada is going to have a wave of white refugees that will obviously get a superb treatment compared to everyone else. I'm talking about Ukrainians who are going to come. Unless I'm wrong, I think I've read that Canada has the largest Ukrainian population outside of Ukraine and Russia.
It's in the top 3 for sure.
There you go. Sure. There you go. So, I mean, how did Ukrainians come here? And this is not something against the Ukrainians. EDI is not about the person, the individual, the group dynamics and the power dynamics in question. Ukrainians were brought here to farm their lands, notably in central Canada, aka Saskatchewan and stuff, Why? In order to whiten the country, in order to diminish all those indigenous people who were there, to evict them from the place and to put more white people. The same process that happened from Canada to Brazil, going to Australia, and this is why people got to South Africa as well, to whiten the land. So EDI definitely will come into play. Now, it is absolutely, absolutely true that there is a pushback. There is a pushback, and the pushback will actually grow. This week, I was actually giving an EDI training, a 3 days EDI training, and one of the things I always remind the professionals, and they were all white in this training, one thing I always remind them, they're the professionals of the 21st century. And as such, they cannot have a limited worldview and a limited national and local view due to the privilege of the whiteness, aka, affording to close their eyes, and then suddenly they surprise themselves that white supremacy is growing. And white supremacy, when it's confident, it doesn't just hurt Black people and Jewish people and LGBTQ people. It hurts everyone, including whites, white moderates, right? So the way I would put in terms of the situation of EDI right now, hang in there, my friends. Do not give up. Challenges are here. There's always been challenges. More challenges will come. Those of us who are in the establishment, we must not do inclusion, diversity in the room. That's not enough. We must hold the door open for others to come in. We must create the space for those who have even more marginalized stories to have the space. But we must not succumb to providing whiteness with what I call morbid curiosity, aka let's hear that sad story about a Black person without them doing work to address their own prejudices and to dismantle the structures that benefit them. And I don't say this in terms of an optimist or naive mindset. I am not. But the difference is this. Right now, we live in times that, in terms of social work, social discourse, but as well geopolitics, tends to remind very much of the 60s and 70s. Right now, Ukraine and Russia are kind of like reminiscent of the Cuban Missile Crisis and the Cold War. But then all the issues that we have, notably since, George Floyd, no, Charlottesville, even Trayvon Martin, all of these issues, very similar 60s and 70s. And as such, it's a time of change. It's a time of change that is also spurred by what? Change of demographics. A lot of these white nationalists, white right-wing ideologues, and even those that many people view as moderates, such as Toronto University professor, I don't know if he's still a Toronto University professor, by the way, Jordan Peterson, they're scared.
He told us he was quitting.
Oh, I guess he felt the wind of change. But these people are going to radicalize themselves because they don't like all this Blackness. They don't like all this non-whiteness that is rising, that is picking up, that is standing up. They don't like that we are educating our children, our youth, and we are awakening more of our people to the dangers of excessive entertainment, excessive consumerism, and Abrahamic white supremacist religions. They don't like it because they feel threatened. EDI, aka critical race theory in the United States, is absolutely here to awaken the minds of those who yesterday were marginalized and are still marginalized today, but to awaken their minds in a place where they have a reply. But a reply is not just throwing the history of political or social facts. It's also to construct our communities. It's also to stand up. It's also to say, if you want me to work with you, it's as a partner, not as your servant or slave, or to accept being underpaid. That is out of the question. And we must hold even our own accountable. Our own accountable. Why? Because too many of our people raise the fist when we are together. Soon as a white person or non-Black person comes in, the speech starts to change. And too often, they open their hands to take money so that they don't speak up anymore. We have to denounce those of our own who do such. So, me personally, I am positive more EDI is coming. how do you call that thing? Allow me to give a crazy example here. I don't know if many people have heard about the famous People Convoy, aka the American version of the falsely named Freedom Convoy in Canada. It was a dismal failure. It didn't generate the millions of people. It didn't start the next American Revolution. It had all this QAnon and conspiracies, whatever you want to call them. But wait, if you only hear that it was a failure, you completely missed the point. It was a big success because it brought in more right wing people together. It legitimized white supremacy speech. It basically made a lot of white, fragile people feel more empowered by meeting a lot more other white fragile. So they will organize, they will stand up, they will vote, and yes, they will also buy more weapons. So we must organize. We must stand up. We must not just look at the few, such as our sisters, like I'm sorry, our sisters such as in Georgia. Help me here,
Stacey Abrams.
Stacey Abrams. We must not just look at them. We must not just clap hands because of a Supreme Court black nominee. We must look at Tyrone and Keisha. I'm speaking very stereotypically here. We must look at Tyrone and Keisha, Kofi and Shanae to uplift them.
Tay.
To uplift them. Absolutely. We must look at Junior. There's a Junior in every black family.
Yeah.
We must uplift our own because ultimately, EDI is here to stay. Let's just make sure that it stays on our own rhythm.
Al, both of you have been doing this passion for EDI for a long time. Are you feeling the environment has gotten any better or receptive into those rooms or conferences that you go in? Is there a different feel now compared to years ago? Elle, I'll let you go first.
Well, I think if someone's inviting me, they know what they're getting. So
they better.
It's usually like law based or like in another university, and they know what they're asking for. So I'm not like, I don't have an EDI consultantship where I'm, going in and doing, I don't know, like the people at the DMV that have to do mandatory training, right? That's not really the kind of work I do. Like it would be more, like speaking to family lawyers or something. So I personally haven't had like a lot of backlash on that. But like I said, people who are inviting me are already probably pretty far along that road. Like they want to hear something political. They know that I'm going to talk about policing or whatever. Sometimes they'll tell me like, we have like prison guards in our union. So can you like not make personal comments about guards or something? Like they'll tell you stuff like that. But other than that, I think if they're having me, they know what they're getting. So obviously when I started doing poetry, like when I was a lot younger and like even just stuff I was saying, there was a ton of backlash. Like I was talking about, policing and stuff at Black History Month in like 2007 when I was like very young and gentrification and stuff. People got very upset with me because I was like, not talking about drumming, like I was talking about political stuff. And that's been the case for like a large part of my life, that people have always found the stuff I'm saying like pretty confrontational or makes people uncomfortable or, it's not soft enough. So I'll get that. And that's always true. I mean, less so obviously like now. But no, I mean, in the trajectory, my life has been out of backlash. Like as I get sort of more institutionalized, I guess I get to be taken more seriously. But I think there's still a lot of, I mean, in any space, like, like who invites me to speak, like government people aren't exactly like thrilled with me, like I think there's always people that see a Black woman speaking as inherently disruptive, as inherently confrontational, as inherently dangerous. I've definitely done stuff where I've done like my most toned down version of things and then had people be like, that was really edgy, like you pushed us really far. And I'm like, that was actually like the most toned down stuff. That wasn't edgy at all. So I get that. But I think, I mean, I guess to some extent, because of who I am, the only places that will have me are places that are ready to have me. So if I'm in the door, we're probably a little further along.
And I'm going to flip over to Cesar in just a moment. But one of the things that concerns me there is, why aren't you in places that you should be in?
Oh, well, I mean, That's been my whole life, you know.
Understood, but that's
right about most things. I'm not going to say I'm right about everything because no one's right about everything, but like politically, I've been right about most of, you know, especially around violence, deep violence, prisons, you know, everything I was saying for years. And I'm not the first person to say them by any means. Like these are long-standing things, but you know, stuff that people really got upset with me now, the same people that got upset with me are saying those things too, you know. So, but that's a function of misogyny, right? Like Black women say things, we're not taken seriously, we're seen as crazy. I guess I'll put some shade out here now and say, you know, that the defunding report that we talked about a bit on this show, like the path defining report for HRM, has been picked up by like a number of municipalities, different groups, like not just in Canada, across North America. People been reading this report, talking about what's in there, using it as a blueprint. I ain't seen a single Black man tweet that, share that, talk about it, acknowledge it. You know, so when Black women are doing this work, people don't credit it. They don't recognize it. You know, and then the white man does a report and you'll all fall over yourselves to put it up. Oh, really important report by the UN, a really important report by this white expert. And then you have a Black woman expert doing something that hasn't been done before, leading a police board, like police governance report into defunding. And you won't support that. Like you don't even understand like what it takes to do that. And then to have a report that's very material. So like our own people need to support us when we're doing this work. And then when we ask like, why are Black women so marginalized? Because even the people in our own community take us for granted and don't, you know, acknowledge our work when it's done. And then we'll steal it and then go sit at the table by themselves and talk about all the work they do and get the award for it. Well, like, and I mean, this is just a pattern with Black women. So maybe not to go off about that too much, but we're still not acknowledged as the intellects we are, as the organizers we are. Black women is still kind of seen as nurturers and the second string. And what we're really waiting for is like a real Black man to step in and do that leadership. And then like he can be taken seriously, but Black women are crazy, right? So our own people also contribute to that. Like it's from white supremacy, but I find it very hard. Like as a Black woman, I think that you just never get your due ever from anybody, from white people or from Black people. So like
interesting. Cesar, how is the feel of DNI for you now compared to a few years ago? Are you feeling that you're being more receptive? And also do you see the people taking action, the organizations taking tangible action, not symbolism?
In my case, no. In my case, I have to say yes. When I say yes, again, you have to be careful. I always remind people of this. I'm not a positivist. I'm a realist. However, we have to understand EDI and all these social discourses, conversations are about a journey. You cannot, depending on where you are on the journey, expect people to be at the same place or expect people to create the change tomorrow that you have already done. If I take the leadership of one of our brothers and heroes standing just behind me, Brother Malcolm X, he has a great quote that I love. Be mindful of judging others for what you know today, for there was a time that you did not know what you know today. So it's a journey, it's a process. And parenthesis, I'm sorry, I'm kind of going off track here. Just going back to Sister L, a lot of people love that painting of Black leaders behind me. I always tell them, I'm very sorry that I haven't seen a female version of it, but I have a photo of Black female leaders and I share it to them by email. So that's it, because Sister L is right about the misogyny and notably the misogynoir. Allow me to continue. In my personal case, it's very different. I begun this as doing volunteer work, addressing high schools, giving conferences on racism for free. Now, of course, being a director, being a consultant, working with institutions, sitting on administration, on directors' boards, such as on mental health, such as on youth, definitely, absolutely makes a difference. If we want concrete example, end of last year in the fall, I trained the senior leadership of the French Catholic School Board of Eastern Ontario. Concretely, what they did from that training, they produce a declaration of anti-black racism, a statement. But that statement that some people may think is just symbolic comes with concrete actions, notably in terms of the curriculum. This is where the real battle is at, so that black youth in elementary and high schools have a curriculum that also speak of the stories that addresses the reality. But it also speaks in terms of hiring of black teachers, mentoring. Me, I speak the same way, whether with Dr. Vibe, whether I'm giving a conference or training, or I'm here with family and friends. I speak the same way. And as such, one of the things that come is holding accountable not just white, but also our own people. This is why, very purposely, I don't shy away from, example, talking about religion. I don't wear a mask. But one of the things I've noticed that there is an evolution of our people, notably in being more open to the discourse on things that bother them. I mainly address three themes in the Black community: entertainment, consumerism, and religion, related to identity and related to power dynamics that impact us. And when it comes to whiteness, is to break that shell of comfort, that shell of fragility and privilege, and to bring them to see the world in which you're living is changing. I don't care if you are in an urban city or in a rural city. Because if you're in a rural city and you think this doesn't concern you, there is a Chinese restaurant in your rural city. Those immigrants who need a mosque are coming. Those black people, whether they listen to hip hop music or some Afro beats or maybe Caribbean, whatever you want to call it, they're coming. So you have a choice. You can be resistant today and wonder what has happened, or you can think ahead. Think ahead, not just for yourself, but also for your children. It's the same message that I hold to everyone. For me, the experience is good, but one of the things that greatly saddens me, and allow me to finish here, I don't want to take too much time, and maybe Sister L has had that experience, I do not know. I'm not saying this in frustration. However, I am concerned, maybe sad, but concerned that I know too many black people will complain of not making enough money, or not feeling valued, of not feeling like they are truly part of this society. And I tell them, join my organization, work with me, help me. I can get you educated on the topics I address. I can work with you on what you know and help you expand, reach another level, be able to be part of forums, training, conferences, and you get paid much higher. And when that comes, they disappear. They don't take a brother seriously. So if I, as a black man, with my size, my experiences, I freely share how much I make. I freely share my upcoming whatever conferences and stuff like that. I invite people, and my Pan-Africanism, when I invite people, is on the four corners of the world. But when come concrete actions for our people to be involved in the process of change, most of them disappear. Our black people are still too scared and too often still lack supporting the work of our own that is not stereotypical. So they will not support Sister L because, a report on defunding the police. But I bet you Sister L was there twerking and booty shaking. Maybe they're sharing it. I'm sorry. I got to be blunt.
Hey, this is what, hey, say it like you believe it is. I agree. L, do you want to add on? Well, if I ever get, I'm speaking, I will get the privilege and opportunity to meet L, and we're gonna bring it down and take video of it and show it to everybody. No, Al, do you want to add anything on to that?
No, I think we're good. I think
no, but you know, I have to say it. It really saddens me. Allow me to give a very, very, let's say 1 minute or two. Let me tell you how right Sister L is. Something happened this week. Today's Sunday, so let's say it happened Friday. Yeah, it happened Friday. There was an article. I'll have to find it. There was an article in French about an African sister who created a site or platform for Black women gaming. It was shared, men and women, all black, mocking it, making fun of it. On the main page, it was shared mainly by, page online, mainly by white people. Of course, they were laughing. I didn't have time, but because people were laughing, I had to jump in. And I put in a comment. I've been in the gaming community for 30 years since starting high school. And I can absolutely assure you there is discrimination and sexism on women gamers. So imagine when that woman gamer is also black.
Hmm.
I had to go take out screenshots of articles about what it's like to be gaming while a woman, gaming while being a black woman. And for many of them, it was like, wow, I didn't know. But you
Oh,
see, my problem is not the fact that they didn't know. Why is it that it took a brother, me, to go back up a sister that I don't know when I don't have the time and I have to send you all these screenshots to tell you this is real? And sometimes the harassment that they suffer online comes physically in real life. Why couldn't they just believe the sister's words? Why couldn't they do their own research? Everybody likes to say they do their own research. Why couldn't they do it? So, yeah.
well, I want to shout out the ladies like Elle who are on the front line, especially when it comes to doing DNI. Cesar is a rarity because most of the people I know that are doing DNI presentations are Black women.
That's
And a lot of the times they're brought in to speak or they're hired by organizations and they've got to run their own show. They don't get the support. And I want to tip my hat off to you and say it's not easy. But I think the key thing is we have to have a system to combat a system. We can't expect great results if we don't have a system and a support to combat that system. Just my thoughts adding on to that. So
and it's part of the reason why your show is important, Dr. Vi, because I mean, I get some of my people listening from Belgium and France when they come to the first time on your show and they're like, whoa, like they love the fact of the connection. They hear the stories, and the stories are not just Canada limited. When they see it's connected worldwide, they're like, yo, there is a show in Canada. Something is happening. Let's listen.
well, I thank you, but can't do it without Elle, yourself, Sarah, Ryan, who's on sometimes, and we cannot forget Warren either. So all of you are the core, and we just got to keep on doing it because the more we know, the more we need to know. So I think it's just very, very important that we continue to do, and it's not hard work for us; it's heart work. You know, we're in for the long haul. So our ancestors, they had it tougher than us, so we would be remiss and we would shunning them and disrespecting them if we didn't carry on the fight because they had a lot tougher circumstances to try to get through than what we have today. So we are committed in a good way. We're not going to be committed like not an institution. We're going to commit it and keep on doing it. So I appreciate the kind words of all of you and everyone who supports us, whether live replay and wherever you are in the world. So to know that this is having a positive impact in places outside of Canada, we're doing good stuff. So let's transition on. Since how you want to talk about Russophobia and anti-blackness, what you mean?
Yes, yes, yes. Listen, my friends, let us be honest here. It's March 13. I think we can say positively, much respect to the families that still have sick members and people dying, but we are coming out of a pandemic called COVID-19 that will pretty much stay with us, but at least the pandemic part is over. But it very much seems like we're walking into a new pandemic called anything Russia and Russian, stay away from it. If you speak Russian, erase that from your resume because right now you might not get a job. Everything, I mean, vodka is being banned. Anything like, it's like, look, we are black people. This is a white war. Ukraine, Russia, it's not about taking side. That's first thing I have to say. Second thing I have to say is that I'm sorry. As black people, we know far too well what these Western countries of NATO would like to claim freedom and democracy, what they've done to our people. And our people, blacks and indigenous in their countries, but as well around the world, we can go through a long list. So Russia, Ukraine, as a sole example, when America has killed so many more in Afghanistan, in Iraq, and etc., etc., when France is a champion at deposing African leaders and putting new ones. Okay, the Russophobia is very much the anti-Russian sentiments, fear, and hatred. To a certain way, it can be legitimate when we look at countries of Central Europe and the past history regarding being under the thumb of the Soviet bloc communism during Cold War. My problem, however, becomes this one. When we talk about these anti-Russian sentiments, how does that link to anti-blackness? Well, I see it very much in terms of such as the work of Albert Camus, L'étranger, the stranger, the otherness, the fact that at the end of the day, what we're seeing right now with Russia and Ukraine is just a reminder in terms of white supremacy under the veil of democracy, under the veil of freedom. Us Black people have to pay attention to what's happening. What's happening because just yesterday, just as tomorrow, we Black people are still otherized. We are still basically discredited when we tell our stories. We are still discredited. I mean, Putin says his version, and no matter how you agree or disagree with him, explain to me how does that make it fair that anyone and everyone, just because they're Russian, they have to be blamed for Putin? That becomes a problem. That becomes a problem when a Russian a pianist show is canceled, even if he doesn't support Putin in the war. That becomes a problem when they're expecting NHL players of Russian descent or Russian nationality to have to pick a side. But at the same time, for us as Black people, when we're seeing this white on white war, they love to talk about black on black crime, white on white war, a speciality of Europe, a speciality that is very Caucasian. When we see that and we see the lies, the manipulation, the Western propaganda, people hear about Russian propaganda. That's true. Western propaganda. We have to pay attention in the years that are coming. Why? Just as we were talking about in terms of the changing demographics, the critical race theory, the EDI, equity, diversity, and inclusivity, we are living in a time very similar to the 60s and 70s, with an inflation coming, with environmental issues coming, with geopolitics growing beyond Russia, beyond USA versus China. As Black people, if we don't get organized, it's going to be worse than Russia. Because those Russians, they're still white. They can be boycotted, they can be banned from whatever it is, but they're still white. For us Black people, we need to get organized. We need to stand up. We need to speak up. We need to stop wasting our time. I mean, I read the stories of some Black men who are enlisting to go fight for Ukraine. What's wrong with those brothers? They wouldn't be fighting for the hood. I doubt they would be going to fight for the Caribbean nations or for African nations. But oh my God, for Ukraine, for freedom and democracy, they're going to go lay down their lives. Russians are going to capture them. Even I won't be able to blame the Russians for just killing them as mercenaries. We have a problem. We have a problem. So this white on white war, even racists like Prince Williams claiming this shouldn't happen to civilized Europe. The racist language that we see, this is a white on white war. Read between the lines. So I just wanted to make sure that our people are paying attention and don't think this is just some isolated case. We're living in a fascinating time, but let us be analytic about it. Let us be critically reflective about it so that it turns inward towards us in terms of, wait, what am I doing to better my individual faith and the faith of my community?
All right. Elle, do you want to add on in terms of Russophobia and anti-Blackness?
Yeah, I think there's, as usual, we can hold complex positions simultaneously. So, and I read an article talking about this, like it is a mistake on the left for us to end up minimizing Putin in order to, under the guise of anti-imperialism, right? So we get a lot of discourse where, as we rightly point out, like, the US does all these things, they invade countries, but we have to be careful that it doesn't, that we endlessly sort of say, but the US, and don't acknowledge that obviously, Russia really is like, this is a geopolitical, this is like the still continuation of the Cold War. Russia also has designs on Africa along with China. Russia also has designs on our country. So the idea of like minimizing, who Putin is, his authoritarianism, his own white supremacy, we have to be really careful around that, because often we sort of go, well, the US. So we can hold that and say that, legitimately we need to, like we can't end up sort of defending Putin because we don't like the US. With that said, obviously, at the same time, we can acknowledge that, yes, the US is an imperial power. The idea of like Russian athletes being banned, nobody banned the US when they invaded Afghanistan. I mean, we in Canada are directly contributing to the war in Yemen. We give weapons to Saudi Arabia. The Griffin Poetry Prize, the richest poetry prize in Canada, is funded by a guy that's an arms trafficker to Saudi Arabia.
What?
Oh, yeah. Like, he's like the biggest arms dealer. The, what do you call them? The, like, not the tanks, but the armored vehicles they use to like pull over people. Yeah, those are Canadian. So like we are manufacturing and selling weapons, but we won't do solidarity with Yemen, even though we're actually like responsible there. And then everybody's like, let's put up the Ukrainian flag at your work. And that is not to minimize, obviously, that Ukrainian people are like we don't need to play whataboutism with violence and war. Like no matter where it happens, war is a terrible thing. Absolutely. But as Cesar has pointed out, part of the problem is that Ukrainians are being treated differently under the idea that this is unusual for white people and it's a natural state for Africans or Muslim people, right? So like, as you said, Prince William saying, well, these are Europeans, I just saw something where I think it was in Bulgaria, the minister said, these are unusual for refugees. They're educated, they're civilized. Like this is just repeated that people are saying, oh, they're blonde and blood, they're educated, they're civilized. They're not like those refugees, right? So we're seeing this extremely racist discourse around, and of course within the, we saw all those, also the stories of like African students not being able to get on the trains, not being allowed out, not being at the borders, all of that. So yeah, I mean, like, why has my work never raised a flag for Somalia, which was being bombed at the same time as Ukraine? We can acknowledge those things without minimizing what's happening in Ukraine. We can hold that together. Just on one last note, I don't know if people have been following Brittany Griner, who's the WNBA star, who was arrested in Russia.
Yeah.
So obviously that's terrible. Obviously, as a queer Black American woman, like there's no worse time to be arrested and being in a Russian jail. At the same time, it's amazing to watch the delusion of Americans saying things like, we can't expect other countries to have our liberal drug laws. You don't have liberal drug laws. The entire war on drugs globally is fed by, and like, this is the US. The US, 25% of the world's prisoners, overwhelmingly due to the war on drugs. You have people doing like 30 years, like Black people for half a rock, So, I mean, I'm like, are you delusional? Like, and Russia isn't doing anything different than you do to people who come across your borders, allegedly. We don't know if Brittany, like it can be planted, right? But allegedly, I wouldn't take vape into the US, Like, in fact, if you have a medical marijuana prescription in Canada, you're advised to be careful because in the US, they can go into your records. And if they see you have a prescription for an actual medical issue, they can keep you out of the States. So, just this kind of delusion around America's own prison industrial complex, their own war on drugs, their own mass incarceration of Black people, it's just like, then you get all these like right-wing politicians now being like, justice for Brittany. And you're like, but what about all the Black people time for like cannabis in the US, right? So as Cesar says, this is part of a geopolitical positioning. This is, the ongoing imperialism of Western countries, the new scramble for Africa, the new scramble for, our lives and countries. And it's quite right that Black people have to understand that. At the same time, we also, of course, have compassion for Ukrainian people and those who are suffering on, the annexation of Crimea. Like, this is real stuff, right? Like, this isn't, so I don't think we can simply just say like, oh, well, they're only Europeans, because we know that we want compassion for the violence in our country. We want the same compassion being given to them. We don't want less compassion for Ukrainians. It's just when it's us, can we also have compassion? Can we also have the flag raising? Can we also have wear the Haitian colors to work or wear the Somali colors to work? Can we also have the fundraisers going around and the vigil, because what you're showing is that only some lives matter still, right?
Yeah.
We don't need to minimize Ukraine or minimize Russia and minimize who Putin is in order to also speak about the other violences and the other wars and the other bombings as well. The other refugees, all of this stuff that is ongoing and certainly does not receive, any of the attention. It's undeniable that is because, people identify with Ukraine in ways that they refuse to identify with Haitians. Oh, by the way, and one last thing, some of the stuff going around, like somebody's company, they send around a fundraiser and they're like, oh, if you have any military equipment, send it to the Ukraine. Like who the F has bulletproof vests just sitting around? It becomes quite absurd in some of the.
It's clearly a message for white people.
Yeah. Well, I think it's partly, honestly, I think often people envy Black people, Indigenous people, protesting and getting to be active. Sometimes I think that, people just want their energy, same thing with the Freedom Convoy. White people want things to feel strongly about too. You know what I mean? They feel left out. So when they get a chance, I think then they're like, oh, can we now be activists? Can we have a solidarity thing? I think that's part of it, to be honest. But it's you could also just come to our stuff and show solidarity for us too. You don't have to wait till it's white people to be involved, right?
Well said. Absolutely.
All right. We're going to close off with a last conversation piece. And surprising folks, we didn't think we had anything to talk about in this effort, but we always have things going on. So recently, Ella brought this to our attention that there was presentations held by the Black Parliamentary Caucus up in Ottawa for the Black budget, or whatever amount of money is going to the Black budget. And it seemed that only certain business organizations were allowed to speak. And Elle brought up the topic, well, what about other organizations other than the ones in the ecosystem getting their chance to present? So Elle, start us off in this conversation. We will join in.
So to be clear, this is not a critique of who was speaking. It's not a why are these people speaking. The question is around budgeting in general and who's included and who's not. Now, obviously, people are familiar with, we were just mentioning the defunding movement. That is about budgeting, right? So budgeting, as we're understanding through the defunding movement, is a justice issue, right? Which is obvious. We fund those things that we value. We fund those things that we want to give power to. This is why we talk about defunding the police. If we stop giving resources to the police, we can distribute them in other ways and we will value things differently in society. So what I'm saying is that the defunding conversation is fundamentally a conversation about budgeting. Not to keep talking about my own report, but in the 7th chapter of our report, one of the things we talk about is participatory budgeting, because we make the point that as part of undoing and thinking differently about the way we do things in society, we also need to think about political actions like budgeting. So on a municipal level, we argue that people should be involved in budgeting in the process. People should be able to say, this is what's in my community. And if we're taking this money from police, it should go here because I know this group is effective. And this is pioneered in Brazil. And it allows people to be connected to their governments. We have extremely low levels of political engagement in Canada, and especially among young people who say, well, doesn't matter how I vote once and I get one of the, whatever capitalist parties, how many do we have now? 5, one of the capitalist parties, and nothing changes. Nobody's fighting for me. So I'm just not voting. I'm disconnected from the system. Something like participatory budgeting says to people, well, you actually are part of the system because you get to make these fundamental choices. So budgeting is fundamentally democratic. So when you have a budgeting pre-meeting and the only people that speak are financial people, entrepreneurs and business people, you are sending a message, which I think is through a very white supremacist narrow lens around what financing, who knows about money, what a budget is, so that only, people involved in business would possibly have some kind of expertise or ability to think or talk about this. Where are the people in justice? Where are the educators? Where are the healthcare workers? Where are the arts workers? All of that is part of budgeting. And more broadly, where is the collective ability of people to be able to come and say, as a mother, I want more pre-literacy programs in school. And some of these things aren't federal responsibilities, obviously, that's part of the problem, but people should still be able to go and speak about that. So federally, okay, education isn't a federal thing, but there are grants that can be done federally to address those gaps. Mental health can come under, federal jurisdiction as well. Like there are many things that even if they are provincial, municipal, there's still federal grants, there's still ways for the federal government to be intervening. So it's worrying to me when a narrow lens is created around like budgeting means business. That seems to suggest that you've got a pre-idea of what you're giving money to, what you value, obviously that tells us which Black organizations and initiatives are going to get money and which ones aren't, because it shows us what the priority is. And more broadly, who counts and who is seen as having a voice, when in fact budgeting is deeply about justice. And if the defunding movement taught us anything, it is that Black people need to be involved in what is happening to the money, because when we don't have any say over this, we see money being given to cops and prisons and all these initiatives that actually harm us. And we need a voice to say, we want money for, this program. We want it for mental health. We want it for food security. We want it for housing. An article actually just came out too, how Ahmed Hussein's office, because he does the housing initiative, and they've actually been giving tax breaks to landlords to encourage them to rent evict people, even though they're claiming to have an affordable housing plan. Like these are things we need to talk about at a budgeting level. The poorest among us. So rent evicting is when like landlords will be like, oh, we're changing the countertops. Now I'm putting rent up to $2,000
Yes.
from $700. And I'm issuing a notice and get out. And that's totally illegal. And it needs to be illegal. And the government is supposed to be putting in place things to stop that. And in fact, they're giving tax breaks and incentives to the same landlords who are doing this to people. So these things should be part of how we talk about budgeting. What kind of initiatives are you doing so that people can have affordable housing? That is a budget issue. So that narrow lens is disappointing. And I don't know, this constant instinct we have to like only rely on a small cadre of people and not allow Black people to just like speak, like hold as many meetings as you need to hold so that Black people who want to speak can show up and speak. Like we're not white people here. We don't have to have scarcity, austerity narratives and then say only some of you can come to the table. We have to start thinking differently. Because if we want something different as Black people, we have to undo the systems and the assumptions and hierarchies that underlie these systems and do things in a different way. And the idea that money is above our heads and we can't be involved in that, and that's something that happens to us, is deeply undemocratic, and it's anti-Black as well. So, yeah.
Thank you, El. Cesar, what would you like to add?
I will make it very short. To what extent are we to find Black issues to Black problems by repeating white ways of doing to create white-led solutions? Because ultimately, when we talk about budgets for issues of Black people in a country such as Canada, in this Western country, the hand that gives is always the hand that controls. And this is part of the reason why other communities, and I'm thinking here notably about the Jewish community and the Chinese community, they're not that depending on the government. Don't get me wrong, they do get money from the government. They do. It's just not mediatized as it is for us, notably because before that government money, they have strongly built communities. And as such, when we have small circles of those who get the invites and will go into the meetings, to what extent does it become really representative? To what extent does it really become about the Black community versus being about the clique? I mean, we must have these conversations. And, don't get me wrong, our changes to Blackness and advancing social issues, just as speaking of Black political representation, no matter how much we talk about the accountability and people have to be involved, etc., if we are still in a begging position at the table when it comes to talk about money, finances, budget, we are losing.
El, you wanted to add?
I didn't mean to interrupt. I just wanted to say that, just to add to Cesar's point, that then people are scared to say or do anything that will get them removed from the table. Because if the table is a scarce place, and if you're an organization and getting funding and credibility comes from being at the table, when you're at that table, you're not going to say things that challenge the people that run the table, because then they'll be like, bye, we can get someone else to this table. So this is the problem with scarcity, is then people have to fall in line to stay there. When if it's open to everybody, then like people can come in and speak their mind. So it also actually shuts down people's ability to actually critique and challenge the government, because they know the next time the invites come out, you ain't going to be on it because you caused trouble the last meeting. So
Well, it gets back to my three as usual. The three things that many Black people either are afflicted with, and one of these things: trauma, repetition, symbolism. Trauma, repetition, symbolism. So, and I'll be honest here, I was invited, I think a year or two ago, to speak. I wasn't invited this time. I hope I don't know if I upset anybody, but who knows? But, and the thing is, I'm allegedly a media outlet and I wasn't even told about this. That's a whole other conversation then. So I think what we have to realize, having a limited amount of people as Black leaders is not going to get us anywhere. You know, it just, we have to have it spread out right across the spectrum. And we have to change, not to say there's nothing wrong with the faces that are there, but we also have to bring in other faces and other voices too. Because it's just, there's that repetition thing coming in all over again. The repetition. And again, doing the same thing and the results. Now, I will say, I know, Al, I don't know if you did hear that Minister Hussein did announce a housing initiative for, oh, you want us to talk about that?
But go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
No, but well, and actually, I'm going to be having some people coming on, but I have talked, Minister Hussein, the housing minister, announced this initiative with Isaac Olowefe, a few other people, and also Habitat for Humanities to like build 200 houses for Black Canadians, just right across the country. I've spoken to a number of Black realtors. They're saying they ain't going to do a lot, but that's a whole other conversation.
People pointed out, they're like, in Toronto, like, you know, because like the amount of money, they're like, aren't houses like $1 million in Toronto, you know?
Well, the thing I did hear, and I did have some people who are realtors who know more than I do about this, said it's good for right across Canada. So
well, I mean, even here, our housing's like 700 average for a home right now, you know? So the federal government needs to get housing prices down, because yeah, you cannot build enough houses. You cannot possibly, like 200 houses is nothing for families. And the problem is you can build those houses and they can be $1 for everybody, but everybody else's housing is, I can't afford a house. Like who the hell can afford a house? Like nobody can afford a house. Like, you know, if it's 700,000, everything's going for 100 above like the listing price. So you're in a bidding war with like white people who have, you know, whatever their grandmother left them an RRSP and it's matured to $150,000. Like it doesn't matter what your job is. You can be a doctor, a lawyer, all you want, but you still have to like have a down payment on a house. So this goes back to my thing of what I said with like EDI. Like we have to be really careful of solutions that come for a tiny amount of people and do nothing to address the underlying core issue. We have to address foreign investment in our housing. We have to address landlords. We have to address like things like rent evictions. Like, why is there scared? Like, we have to look at the root of the affordable housing crisis and address that. Building a few more homes that, like, a lottery ticket has to get you into isn't going to solve it. I actually have to stop talking because there's food at the door.
Okay. Well, Elle, before I let you go quickly, how can people get in touch with you?
They can always email me at Mount St. Vincent University, and that's about it.
Go get your food. Okay. All right. Take care. Cesar, any final comments, and how can people get in touch with you?
No, really, my final comments would just be, my Black people, do not go lose yourself in this Ukraine versus Russia war, because trust me, it's another white on white war. And by the way, I forgot to mention this: the government of Ukraine is getting blasted in Africa because they actually try to recruit Africans to come enlist as mercenaries for them.
Wow.
100%. The Republic of Senegal voiced an official complaint of Edil was in Senegalese news and all that, very similar to World War I, World War II. So, Ukraine, the victim, very having a racist behavior beyond the treatment of African students trying to flee the war. Let us focus on our community. Let us stand up, speak up. Let us get organized. Let us join those who are making the effort, because the success of one means nothing if the group is failing. In the Jewish and Chinese communities, there are poor people. There's a lot of poverty in China. I think in Israel, it's what? I think 1/3 of children, or maybe 1/4 of children, live under the poverty line. Yet you don't think of Jewish communities and Chinese communities as poor. So it's about the group dynamics. And yeah, I will basically leave it at that. Feel free, everyone. You can reach me on Facebook, Cesar Remy, Rimy. I'm still there.
Excellent. Thank you, Cesar. Thank you so much for always taking the time and always amplifying the cause and asking for clarity and unity.
Absolutely.
Clarity and unity. It's Dr. Vibe here, host and producer of the award-winning Dr. Vibe show, the home of Epic Conversations. I'm the host of Epic Conversations, 2020 Best Podcast News Award winner, 2018 Innovation Award winner, given out by the Canadian Ethnic Media Association. Also, I host the only online conversation in the world for dads and fathers. It's sponsored by Dove Men Care, also co-sponsored by Dad Central Canada's National Fatherhood Organization. I'd like to thank everyone who took the time to listen live or on the replay. And always, I'd like to close off with this. Live your life as a dream. If you can dream it, you can make it. Sometimes you have to get small to get stronger. Block assumptions, then aim bigger, aim better, aim higher, aim wider. Love, faith, and respect. Also, if you are up to it, subscribe to the Dr. Vibe channel on YouTube and also subscribe on Facebook. You can also catch me not only Sunday afternoons at 5 p.m. with Black Canada Talking, Monday and Friday mornings at 9 a.m. Eastern Time. Myself and Ryan Knight co-host The Morning Vibe, where we showcase Black Canadians around Canada and also in North America, and Black people in North America, around the world, etc. And then on most Saturday evenings at 9 p.m. Eastern Time, I host State of Things with Aisha K. Staggers and Jill Jones, where they give their takes and their takes about what's going on in the United States and around the world too, in regards to social and political issues. I'd like to thank BIA Media for another excellent production job. And always, two last things. Remember to give yourselves grace, and also, it's important to manage your time, but more important to manage your energy. God bless, peace to all, keep the faith, and walk good.
Ottawa's Black Business Alliance, a place where you can learn to be your own person and build the future you want for yourself. Our mission is to help young entrepreneurs achieve their business goals through the best coaching, managing, consulting, and a slew of other services. Together, we can become a pillar in the Afro-Canadian community. Don't hesitate to contact us through our website at www.oba.ca, and remember that building tomorrow starts today. OBA Consulting. Take hold of your future.